If you were here last week, we brought this whole idea up about vintage faith. Vintage faith is, vintage the word, we try to look at that because sometimes when we think of vintage, we might just think of old. And we don't want to think of old today. We don't want to think of something old and dusty and irrelevant. That's definitely not what vintage faith is. But vintage is something of value, something that's worth bringing back. If we were to walk out the door today and there's a car show in the parking lot, and we went around and started looking at the cars, I don't think you'd see many vintage Pintos out there. I don't think there'd be anyone who went out and restored a Gremlin or a Dodge Dart or something like that. But you would see, Mustangs and Corvettes. You would see, all of these awesome cars, 57 Chevys and 68 Camaros and these beautiful cars. Why is that? Because they're worth bringing back. They're worth restoring, right? I've got a few cars sitting in my driveway. Not a few. I have 2 cars sitting in my driveway, and I can tell you that neither one of those would probably be worth restoring or bringing back. If anything, someday they'll probably be something that someone should take out and shoot them. But they're not probably worth bringing back. Well, that's kind of what we're looking at today is faith of a quality that is worth bringing back. Stories of faith in the Bible that capture an aspect of faith that we need to bring back. We need to understand and see and how we can apply those in our own life. Last week we talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We talked about how they told the king they would not bow down to the statue that he had built of himself. They would not do that because that would be denying their God. They would be denying the living God by doing that. And we talked about how their statement of faith is so huge because the king says, well, I'm going to throw you into the furnace. You have signed your death sentence. I will throw you into the furnace. And their response I love because they say, we believe our God will save us, but even if he does not, we will not bow to your image. Their faith was a relational faith that said, we believe, we trust God, but our faith in him isn't based on what he can do for us. It isn't based on the outcome of the situation, but it's based on our trust, our relationship, our love for him. I didn't get to go to Orlando, Florida this last week. You might be able to tell, I don't know. But I did see some of the stuff online of what was going on at the conference, and especially seeing Facebook pictures and some of those kinds of things. And I saw that the theme of the conference was Soar. Soar. And I really like that idea because it captures the idea of what we want to look at here today in this story of faith that we're going to look at. And it really captures that idea because it's the idea of rising above what's going on and soaring on wings like eagles. We'll look at a verse here in a minute. If you spend any time with me, you know that I look up to my father a great deal. My dad is a pastor. He's pastored for over 40 years. For the story that Pastor Allen made reference to and why my marriage maybe suffered this week, if you remember the 3 poops story. If you don't, you have to go back and watch the video from last week. My wife is still forgiving me for that, but we'll get through it. We'll do some counseling or something like that. But ultimately, I tell those stories because I used to be the pastor's kid, and I used to have those stories told on me all the time. So ultimately, she'll get used to it. She'll get over it. But I look up to my dad a great deal, and I have the opportunity. I've had the opportunity to function in a lot of different areas with my dad. As I said, he's been a pastor for over 40 years. I actually, before moving to Sioux Falls, served as youth pastor under him for 14 years in our church in Bismarck. But before that, I actually had the opportunity to work with him in a secular environment for about a year. He was actually a trainer for a call center for a health insurance company that's in Bismarck. And so I had the opportunity to sit under him, watch him in a totally different environment. So this is a guy I've lived with, obviously, he's my dad. I've worked with in a normal work environment, and then I've served in ministry beside. And I can tell you there's nobody that I have more respect for because he's the same person wherever you go. There is no hypocrisy. There is no difference in who he is. He is the exact same person when he's standing training a bunch of people on how to answer questions on an HMO insurance plan and when he's standing up in the pulpit preaching the Word of God. Exact same guy. But one of the things that I look up to my dad so much is he is actually a police chaplain. A police chaplain is a person who works with a police department. They they will go around with them and ride in the vehicles with them. They will minister to them during those times just through a ministry of relationship. But one of the big tasks of a police chaplain is they actually go on the scene of what are called unattended deaths. Now, an unattended death can range from anything from an elderly person who died in their home alone and there wasn't anybody there to take care of, or it can be a suicide, it can be a homicide, it can be any number of things an unattended death can mean. Basically, it just means that the person died and the police need to come in to see what happened there. And one of the things that a police chaplain does is they actually work with the police to make notifications, death notifications on these unattended deaths. So my dad, one of the things he will do is he will go into a home and he will actually ring the doorbell, they will answer, and he will deliver the worst news that mother, that father, that brother, that sister, that spouse could ever imagine hearing in that moment. Now you can imagine that this is emotionally charged situations he's walking into, or in a sense he's creating because he's the one bringing the bad news. But his job is to walk in, and one of the things he talks about often is the idea of a non-anxious presence. Basically what it is he's there to provide calm. Even though there's chaos going around him, even though there are emotions flying like crazy, his job is to walk in and to provide calm. In a sense, his job is to rise, to soar above the circumstances. I can tell you that many, many times after he's done being involved in a situation like this, police officers will come up to him and they will actually say, first of all, they'll say thank you, because this is a huge ministry to the police officers that they don't have to deliver this news. But secondly of all, they'll say, I can't imagine how anyone could do this without faith. I can't imagine how anybody could handle this without faith. There's a verse in the Bible that talks a little bit about this idea. Isaiah 40:31 says, "Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Those who hope in the Lord will soar like eagles. They will rise above those circumstances. Today we're going to talk about a new character from the same book of the Bible, from the book of Daniel. Last week we looked at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Today we're going to jump to another, he was actually a friend of theirs. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and you heard some stories last week on my kids and my wife. But one of the things I like about kids is they always have a way of capturing the essence of something. We tend to get into complicated thinking and doing things. Kids just tend to grab a simple question and they'll throw it out there. And the other day she actually asked me, she said, "Dad, were any of the people in the Bible friends?" And I said, "Well, yeah, you've got Jesus and the disciples." And no. She said, I know them, but like people who weren't in the same stories together, were they friends? And the funny thing is, this morning we're talking about that. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually lived at the same time in the same area and actually would have been kind of peers together. And Daniel actually is another person living in exile. We talked about that last week with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're living in exile. They're living in a foreign land, living under foreign control, living in a place where they kind of can feel lost sometimes. They can kind of feel out of it. But yet Daniel, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, chooses to trust God. And it all starts with Daniel being chosen for something. Now, we like being chosen for things, right? You know, when I was a little kid on the playground and we're lining up for kickball or whatever we're lining up for, I want to be chosen by, and I especially want to be chosen by the good team, right? You've always got the 2 captains and you've got the one you're hoping chooses you. You want to be chosen. You want to be set apart for something. So Daniel's chosen for something, and that could feel awfully good. Daniel's actually chosen with our guys from last week. They're set apart to learn under the best teachers in the land. They're set apart to eat from the king's table, eat the best food, because the king has a plan for them. He has opportunities that he wants to put before them. I was thinking about this in terms of our own country. We tend to now see how many of our leaders, our politicians, our different people who are in leadership, they come through the same line of things. You start to see the same colleges, the same, now you're even starting to see some of the same, lower level schools, because we kind of have these grounds that we raise people in, and we raise them for success. We put them in line for opportunity. I found it interesting, some of our early leaders of the U.S., they didn't have those kind of opportunities. They had to kind of make their own way. And I was reading a presidential biography not too long ago, and it talked about some of these guys. Like Benjamin Franklin, he taught himself 5 languages and was not thought exceptional. Now, how many of you speak 5 languages? None. Okay. So none of you are exceptional, basically. I'm especially not exceptional. I'm nowhere near that. Jefferson taught himself 6, including Arabic. George Washington was unceasingly embarrassed by his lack of intellect, but yet people today, when they read his journals, are amazed at the intelligence of this man. These guys raised themselves up. They had to teach themselves how to be smart. They had to make their own opportunities. They weren't given opportunities. If they would have been, it might have been easy to say, yeah, I'll jump at that. I'll thank you. Thank you for somebody finally making this a little easier for me. And Daniel had that choice right here. He was given the opportunity. He was given the option to do something with that. Daniel didn't come from the right background. He didn't come from a place where they had raised him up for this, but yet he comes to this spot in his life, and he realizes that the king has plans for him. Can you think about that with me for a minute? Personalize it. The king has plans for you. What if you got a notice in the mail today saying, we don't have a king, but the president has a plan for you. He has something specifically he wants you to do. Now, can I be honest? Let's leave politics out. Let's leave whether we agree with the president out or not. But still, wouldn't that be kind of cool? Maybe you'd say, maybe you would struggle with saying yes to it because of political reasons, but wouldn't you save the card that says the president wanted you to do that? Pretty cool, huh? Well, that's where Daniel's at. He gets notice that he has been set up for this. But what Daniel says is, he says his hope was not in man, but his faith was in God, and he wanted to make that clear. This is what Daniel says, because one of the things that was put before Daniel is, you have to do this, you have to eat this certain food. We'll talk about this in a minute, but this was a really, really, really big deal to Israelites, the type of food. And this is Daniel's answer. He says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Then Daniel said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. Daniel had an opportunity. This was plopped right down in front of him. The king saying, through his other leadership, saying, I have chosen you. I've chosen you for a specific task, and this is all you've got to do. I've got it laid out for you. I've got the path laid out to what I have intended for you here. All you have to do is follow this. But Daniel chose, instead of opportunity, instead of choosing something else, Daniel chose faith. He chose to depend on God and not on man, because he trusted God alone. So this seems weird to us, the idea of food being a big stumbling stone. It seems kind of crazy to us, because if we found out today that we got the president's personal chef showing up at our house and he's going to cook for us for the next year, hey, I'd be okay with that, right? I wouldn't complain about that. But this was a huge deal for the Israelites because actually going back to the first 5 books of the Old Testament where God sends Moses the law and he lays out the law before the people, eating was a huge piece of this. There were certain things that the Israelites were not to eat. And sometimes when we look at that, we think of that as this is some form of legalism. This is really just kind of an oppressive thing. Why would God care about this? But yet what it really is it's the idea of constantly keeping God at the front of our mind. When I was in Israel earlier this summer, I got to go for school. If you weren't here last week, I talked about that a little bit. I'm a seminary student right now, and I got to go on a scholarship and study in Israel for 3.5 weeks. And while I was there, we lived with these laws. These food laws are called kosher laws. And we lived with this for 3.5 weeks. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal at first. I'm a very adventurous eater. I like to try. I'll try just about anything once. Just about. There's probably a few things I wouldn't try. But just about anything I'll try once. So I was kind of excited for this experience to eat and kind of function in this different culture. And it was really good, especially for the first week. Then the second week, it was kind of like, I really miss American food. By the third week, I was just ready to come home. But 2 of the main things with this is that in these kosher laws, they do not eat pork among the Israelites, and they do not eat meat mixed with dairy. Now, the pork is a pretty clear one. That's kind of dealt with in Scripture over and over again. The meat mixed with dairy actually comes from a verse in Leviticus that talks about not cooking meat in the milk. But what they kind of take it further just to make sure they cover the whole thing. So think about some of your favorite foods. Pizza? Anyone like pizza? Yeah? We've got to have raised hands over here for pizza, right? Pizza, we like pizza. Well, sounds good, except, no pepperoni, that's pork. Oh, and also no meat at all because there's the cheese on there. You can't mix the meat and cheese. So when we went and had pizza, we went to a New York pizzeria, which is funny to think of in Jerusalem. Went to a New York pizzeria, and what they served there was olive pizza, so green olives on pizza. That was pretty good. And then corn pizza, that wasn't so good. And then French fry pizza, that was worse than corn pizza. Funny thing is, I don't know where they get this from. They actually called the corn pizza and the French fry pizza, that's American pizza. Now, you guys start serving that up in Little Caesars at some point. Now, then we'll really talk about something. I have no idea where they got that from. But it was different. It was a different experience. I can tell you, I just wanted a meat lover's pizza when I was there. It just sounded so, so good. But that was what they had. Think about another food. How about a bacon cheeseburger? No bacon. That's pork. Cut that out. Cheeseburger? Nope. Meat and dairy together. You could have maybe a hamburger or a grilled cheese, but no cheeseburger. Can't do that. How about pasta? Pasta's good. Pasta would work, except if you have white sauce with meat, because, again, that's dairy with meat. So it was really it was weird living in this environment and dealing with these different, eating this different culture. And like I said, for a week, 2 weeks, not so bad. By the third week, you're really ready to come home. Now I'm blessed with an amazing wife who the night I got home made me a giant plate of pork ribs. And yeah, she's amazing that she did that. But it was very different. So Daniel's choice to turn down the king's food, it wasn't some legalistic thing. It wasn't some little decision for him. This was a decision of faith. While we were there, we got to talk to a Jewish store owner. Now, there are what are called Messianic Jews in Israel they still practice a lot of the traditions and customs of the Jewish faith, but they believe in Jesus, and they believe Jesus is their Savior. So they are Christian Jews, basically. Now this guy, his name is Moshe. He's a shop owner. He was not a Messianic Jew. He's a devout Jew. So he doesn't believe in Jesus the way that we believe in him. He still believes that the Old Testament is all we have. And we were talking with Moshe one day. We got into his shop, and our professor had given him some time to talk. This was one of the first days we were there, to give us some perspective on kind of Jewish and Christian relations there. And one of the things Moshe really went into is he talked about how he hears Christians over and over again talk about those of the Jewish faith, how they live in this world of legalism. and how they're constantly trying to do things to earn their way to God. While we're walking around in Jerusalem, you see these Orthodox Jews, and they dress all in black. First of all, we're dressed in shorts and t-shirts, and we're dying. It's so hot. They're dressed in full black pants, suit coats with a white shirt, and then they wear hats sometimes, but they actually have these boxes that they wear on their head. They wrap these, they're like a ribbon around their arms. And all of these things represent to them, actually scriptural represents to them ways in which they are worshiping God, as they say their prayers, as they do these things. And it's easy as you're walking around to say, man, what a bunch of legalism. Why in the world, this isn't doing anything for you. Why are you forcing yourself to do this? But Moshe's explanation was really interesting, because he said, you have to understand, we are not doing this to earn our way to God. We are doing this because we love God. This is an act of obedience, not that it does anything to bring us closer or to bring salvation to us, but we're doing this to show God how much we love him. It's a constant act of worship. And he talked about how literally for Jews, when they get dressed in the morning, these Orthodox Jews, as they're putting on their clothes, they can't help but think about God in that moment. As they're preparing their food, they can't help but be thinking about God, because they're thinking about how they prepare their food exactly. Now, I don't know what your lunch plans are after this. Maybe you're going home, maybe you're going to a restaurant. But whatever it is, I'm pretty sure that the first thing on your mind as you're getting that plate and getting everything organized isn't thinking about God in that plate. Now, hopefully, and to be honest, I think this is probably where our custom of praying over our food comes from, because it puts that in our mind, and it's just another way of dedicating our entire lives to God. But that's what they're capturing. So for Daniel, he's not trying to live out a bunch of rules. He's not trying to do that. He's choosing faith. He's choosing God in what he's going to do, because this is his act of worship. Daniel understands his eating habits beyond the law, and he sees them as his display of faith. He depended on God and not on man. He depended on God and not on man. So what happens with Daniel? It says at the end of the 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them there was none found like them. Therefore they stood before the king, and in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. Daniel depended on God. He trusted in God. And God now provides Daniel with a place of influence. Daniel had turned down an opportunity that was in front of him, an opportunity that the king had put in front of him. When he chose God over that opportunity, but he also chose God's purposes over that one opportunity. Korczak Julkowski, it's a mouthful, Korczak Julkowski, was the original sculptor for the Crazy Horse Monument in the Black Hills. I don't know if you've been there. We're not that far away from it. But I remember going when I was a child, we went to it. And I remember going, and it's massive, and I haven't been there now for a number of years, so maybe more has happened. I'm sure more has happened. But I remember going and kind of looking at it and going, well, I guess maybe someday it'll look like, like the little model that's out front. But even funnier is, we went that one time and kind of couldn't see it very well, but we went back a number of years later. I had an aunt and uncle who came, and we did kind of a whirlwind vacation through the Black Hills. And we went back a number of years later, and it just didn't look any different. It looked almost the same. And if you've ever been there at different times, it doesn't change a lot because it's so massive. Now, when it's done, it's going to be breathtaking. It's going to be 10 times the size of Mount Rushmore. I mean, it's quite a vision. And part of the reason that it moves a little slower, too, is they don't accept any public funding. They're all privately funded to do that. But I remember kind of feeling like, there's just nothing happening here. Who could give their life to something like this? Well, Joukowsky, when he was asked about this by a reporter, his response was very telling. He said, when your life is over, the world will ask you only one question. Did you do what you were supposed to do? Now, for me, standing on the outside looking up at this giant mountain, that all I can see is what maybe looks like is going to be an arm pointing out, I look at it and say, what's the point? What's the purpose behind this? But when Joukowsky looked at it, he saw his life's purpose. He saw it all coming up in front of him. I'm not an artist at all. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old daughter who make fun of my drawing. That tells you how bad my drawing is. My wife is an incredible artist. We have a chalkboard wall in our kitchen, and she'll just sit down one day and goof around, and all of a sudden she has this amazing picture on the wall. And she can see that stuff. I can see it when it's done, and it looks really cool, but I don't have the vision to see what it's becoming. The sculptor in Joukowsky, he could see the vision of what it was becoming, and he knew that that was his purpose. Purpose is powerful because it takes our mind off of our circumstances. It takes our mind away from what's going on all around us, and instead it looks ahead. It looks ahead to the goals, where we're going, what it is we're trying to accomplish. When Daniel chose faith, when he chose God, when he chose that over the immediate opportunity that was in front of him, what he really chose was God's purpose, and God provides it. God provided purpose for Daniel. He provided something beyond what the king could give him. One of golf's immortal moments came when there was a Scotchman who came and he was going to teach President Ulysses S. Grant the game of golf. And he saw this as an opportunity to expand the game. You come, you teach the American president this, it'll take off here. So he saw this as quite the opportunity. You're going to laugh at my golf swing. But the Scotchman steps up. He centers himself over the ball. He says, watch this. This is how you play the game. He takes a big swing. Dirt everywhere. He misses the ball completely. Dirt flies up in the president's face. Just complete failure. Scotch says, wait, here, I'll try again. Dirt, again, all up in his face. 6 times he does this. I can only imagine how dirty the president's face was at this point. But 6 times he completely whiffs. The president, standing there, and I wonder if maybe with a little sense of humor, he says, seems like a good amount of exercise, but I fail to see the purpose of the ball. Purpose is important, right? Without purpose, things don't make sense. The ball serves no purpose when you're not going to hit it, when you're not going to knock it up, toward the green. Without purpose, things just don't make sense. Think of Daniel's situation here. He's in exile. He is in a foreign land under foreign leadership, living in a completely foreign world. It would have been easy for him to just feel like things don't make sense. I'm lost. I don't have any purpose. I don't have any direction here. In one of my seminary classes, we were talking about Ezekiel, which is another book around this time period. And so we were talking about this idea of being in exile. And we actually had some African refugees who came into our class, and they spoke to us on some of the things that they deal with coming to a foreign land as refugees. And I remember the main speaker, he talked about how heartbreaking it was for him to see his people and to see what they were going through. He talked about these were people of accomplishment. They were people who were educated, people who were affluent in their former land, and now they come to America and they haven't been able to find that same level of respect, that same level of involvement. He talked about how former doctors are now waiting in line to get free food because they have no way to support their family. How former teachers are now, they feel like simpletons. They feel like they they have nothing to contribute to society, even though they were wonderful teachers back then. They've lost direction. They've lost purpose because when they look around them, nothing makes sense. It doesn't fit. They know how to do things. They're not idiots. They get this, but they can't find how they fit in this world where we're at. Well, Daniel had to feel that way, right? I mean, he had to feel like a foreigner. I told you about, my trip and how quickly you feel like a foreigner. You know this. If you've ever traveled internationally, you feel like a foreigner really quick. All of a sudden, you can't understand the words that are being said around you. You can't read the signs that are posted around you. You can't, I remember going into restaurants and they would actually give us a menu and we would look at the menu and go, this picture looks good, because we couldn't understand that anything that was on there. Well, this is where Daniel is. He feels like he's kind of lost. He has no, he could feel like he's lost. He has no purpose. He's kind of in a mess there. But Daniel, living in this spot, in these circumstances, says instead, I choose God's purpose. I choose to follow God. I think that there's too many of us as Christians today who live looking for the big opportunity. As a youth pastor for 14 years, I remember so many times we would have different trips or different presentations, and kids would get all excited and wanted to go do something big for God. But then you'd ask them to do something little for God, and it was like, that's really hard. I don't know if I want to do that. We have our eyes on the big prize, the big goal, and yet sometimes God says, well, first let's start here. With Daniel, it started with the simple act of saying, I'm going to choose you over this opportunity. It started with that simple act. Daniel never would have done anything. He never would have accomplished anything if he was always looking for a bigger and better opportunity. He lived in a mess of circumstances. He lived in a situation where he was surrounded by chaos to him. He was surrounded by circumstances that really gave him not much to look forward to. He had to trust that God was directing his steps. And God was giving him purpose. Daniel saw his influence. He saw his purpose growing. And then it comes to the ultimate point. Now we're going to skip ahead here a few spaces. This is sometimes when you're trying to fit stories together and we've got limited time, we have to jump over some spots. So what happens here is Daniel keeps growing in his influence. Our verse talked about how God gave him the ability to understand dreams and some of those things. Well, Daniel starts to do that. His influence continues to grow. God is providing purpose in his circumstance until a moment comes where some around him are kind of jealous of him. They're not too happy with the success Daniel is seeing. And so they basically set him up for a fall. They set him up to come to a point where God won't be able to rescue them or rescue him in their eyes. And so they set up a deal where the king makes an edict, makes a command that you are not allowed to worship anyone but him for 30 days. I think it's 30 days. And you will listen to this or you will be thrown into the lion's den. Sound like any story we've talked about in the last couple of weeks? Sounds a lot like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Either worship this or you will be sentenced to death. But look at Daniel's response. Then these high officials came to agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the counselors, and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber, open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. When Daniel knew the document had been signed, when Daniel knew there's now a law that says worship the king and no one else, when he knew that had been signed, when he knew literally if he doesn't do this, his death sentence had been signed, He went, got down on his knees 3 times a day, prayed, gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. As he had done previously. Nothing changed for Daniel. Now, the circumstances had changed. There's a death warrant now saying, do this and you die. Do this and you will be thrown in with the lions, and don't worry, we'll make sure they're good and hungry when we throw you in there. The circumstances had changed, but Daniel did not. His faith did not. It would have been easy for Daniel to have been pulled down into the fray at this point, but he rises above it. He soars above it. Daniel's faith soars. I got to be honest, when I read stories like this, I'm sometimes, I struggle to wrap my head around this. I'm a South Dakota kid. I grew up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, moved and lived in North Dakota for a while, but I'm a Dakota kid, which means that I'm about as emotional as you guys are. We don't react. We're not the most, emotional people. Ask Pastor Allen about preaching sometime. We're not the most emotional people in the world. That's not a bad thing. We are very consistent a lot of times in how we deal with things. We are very, we kind of live on an even keel. That's not a bad thing. But then when I hear the idea of someone's faith soaring, that can be hard for me to imagine, because it seems like this ultra emotional, incredible experience of just everything, just raising up above everything. I told you about my dad and his work in terms of being a police chaplain. I told you how one of the reasons I look up to him most is because I've seen him in all different situations, and I know he's the same person across the board. And as we're closing today, I can't help but think about his manner in a certain circumstance. A few years ago, my uncle was actually killed in a tragic accident. My uncle worked on ham radios as a hobby. If you know ham radios, it's kind of an old. My cousin, his son, used to make fun of him because he said, we have the internet now. We can do different things. But he really enjoyed doing ham radio. And if you know ham radio, they have giant towers. Well, sometimes just tower off the top of a roof, but in a lot of cases they'll have these big towers. And he was out one day helping somebody take a tower down. It was actually a widow. He was out helping take this tower down because she had no use of it anymore. And while he was helping with that, a gust of wind came up. The tower wasn't attached the way it should have been, and they were many feet in the air at this point. I don't know how many, but a gust of wind came up, tipped the tower over on top of my uncle. He was on top, and it fell with him on top of him. He was killed. Horrible tragedy. One of the hardest things that my family has ever faced. And I remember when I got the call of the news. It was my dad on the other line, on the other end of the line. And I remember him, and as he's telling me this, he's telling me this himself through tears. He's struggling to deal with this. But yet, his words are so powerful to me, because he said, I need you to pray, and with God, we will get through this. Now, I can tell you, my aunt still, and my uncle was 50, I can't remember his exact age, but he was young. He was 1 year from retirement. He was actually, he and my aunt were getting ready. He was going to retire, and they were going to travel. They had all sorts of plans, and this changed everything. It ended those plans. My cousin is 6 years younger than I am, and all of a sudden, he went from, he didn't have a dad. It was over that quick. And I remember that moment because this idea of soaring, Daniel rises above the circumstances, We can sometimes get this image that says that we become removed from the circumstances. Our faith in God is so strong that we're not even affected by what's going on around us. But in fact, I think that's actually like a Greek god kind of thing. We're not Zeus. We're not trying to become removed from what is going on around us. But with God, we're able to move through it. Daniel gets tossed into the lion's den. His death sentence has been signed because he chose to do what he always did. He chose to worship. When he gets tossed into the lion's den, God seals the mouths of the lions. Daniel rests with them, has a nice peaceful rest that night with them. And the king is amazed when he comes to find him the next day. When our faith soars, it's not because of us. It's not because we've found the answer. It's not because we have figured out the key to how to live in faith. But when our faith soars, it's because we have let go of those things around us that we hold on to tightly. It's because we have let go of those opportunities. We have let go of those circumstances that surround us. And we've said, God, carry me. Lift me. Bring me out through this. I don't know where you're at today. I don't know what struggles of faith you're dealing with. I don't know if you have a tragedy that you've faced recently, such as the one that I explained from our family. I don't know if for you it's a struggle of faith to believe that God really is who he says he is and that he'll come through. But I know this. I know that when Daniel chose faith, he wasn't doing it blindly and saying, I don't know what else to do. But he was doing it because he was taking the small steps to lead to where God was leading him. And he was taking those small steps in simply choosing God. The big opportunities come after the little steps. The big opportunities come after saying yes to the first step, and the second step, and the third step, and the fourth step. Daniel's ultimate opportunity came in the form of a death sentence. Because that opportunity then opened up a whole new world for Daniel, that the respect that he had brought on him at that point. And Daniel wasn't even looking at the quote-unquote opportunity. He was simply looking at his choice was always the same. Choose God, choose faith. That is when you'll soar.